A Little Princess. The next morning, when Sarah entered the classroom, everyone stared wide-eyed at her. Sarah sat quietly at her desk and looked back at them. She wondered if they liked the school and if any of them had a papa like hers. Miss Minchin rapped on her desk for attention. "Sarah," she said, "since your father hired a French maid, I assume he wants you to study French." Sarah stood up. She didn't know what to say. "I think he hired her because I like her," she said. Miss Minchin's mouth tightened into a narrow line. "You are a spoiled child," she said, "thinking everything is done just because you like it that way. Your father must want you to learn French." Sarah couldn't remember a time when she didn't know French. It had always been spoken to her. Her mother had been French and her father loved the language. But now she was embarrassed and didn't know how to explain. I have never really learned French," she began shyly. Her classmates snickered. "Well, that's not nice." "Enough!" Miss Minchin interrupted. "You will begin lessons just as soon as Mr. Dufarge gets here. Until then, look at this book." Sarah's cheeks felt warm. She took the book to her desk. When Miss Dufarge entered the room, he smiled at Sarah. "Is this a new pupil for me?" he asked. "Her father wants her to learn French," declared Miss Minchin, "but she doesn't want to." Sarah stood up slowly. She had to do something to make them understand. In French, she explained that Miss Minchin had not understood. She had not learned French in a schoolroom. She had always known it. Mr. Dufarge smiled. "Miss Minchin," he said, "I can't teach French to Sarah. She is French. She could be my helper." Miss Minchin was embarrassed and angry. She turned on Sarah. "You should have told me," she scolded. I tried," Sarah said. The other girls giggled behind their backs. Miss Minchin's face turned red. "Silence!" she demanded. During the regular French class that followed, Sarah noticed a girl with fair hair tightly braided. She was pronouncing the words incorrectly and had trouble remembering. Some of the others laughed at her. Sarah went over to her after class. "My name's Sarah Crew," she said. "What's yours?" The girl could not believe that this princess from a faraway land had come over just to talk to her. Ermengarde St. John," she stammered. "Would you like to see Emily?" Sarah asked. "Who's Emily?" "Come see," Sarah said. She led Ermengarde upstairs. "We must be very quiet or we won't catch her." Ermengarde was puzzled, but she asked no questions. Instead, feeling pleased and excited about being included, she followed along on tiptoe. At the door to her room, Sarah paused and took a deep breath. Then she suddenly threw the door wide open. Inside, the loveliest doll Ermengarde had ever seen sat in a chair with a book in its lap. "Oh," Sarah said, disappointment in her voice. "She knew we were coming. She got back in her chair." "Ready to believe anything?" Ermengarde said. "Ready to believe anything," Ermengarde said. "She can walk?" "Of course," Sarah said. "All dolls walk." Ermengarde's eyes grew large. Dolls were nice to have and hold, but she had never actually thought about them doing anything. "I've never actually seen her," Sarah explained, "but I think she can." I pretend she can. Don't you ever pretend things? Ermengarde shook her head. Like what? She asked. All sorts of things, Sarah said. Then she told Ermengarde about her home in India and how she could pretend she was back in her own room. She told her new friend about the large family down the block. I pretend I know them, you see. I've even given them a name. I call them the Montmorencys. I got that name from a book. Ermengarde was delighted. She had never met anyone as interesting as Sarah. It makes things easier pretending, Sarah said. Her eyes grew sad. She was thinking about her papa. Do you love your father more than anything in the whole world? She asked. Ermengarde didn't know what to say. She didn't know her own father very well. I don't see much of him, she replied. That's too bad, Sarah said. But you could pretend you did. I pretend Papa's away for the day, and at night I fall asleep waiting for him to come home and kiss me goodnight. After a long silence, Ermengarde said, I wish we could be best friends. Sarah's eyes lit up. She smiled. I'd like that, and I will help you with your French. Stay tuned for part 3. See you later. Bye.